We have your next question for Dr. Stenger.
Well, yeah, let me ask this. With respect to your refutations of my arguments, you said all you have to do is to provide some possible naturalistic explanation in order to diffuse the force of my argument. Now, wouldn't you agree, Vic, that it's not enough merely to show a possible naturalistic explanation, but you would need to show a naturalistic explanation that is as plausible as the supernaturalistic explanation? I mean, anything is possible. Scientists don't get research grants from the government for proposing just possibilities. They have to be plausible hypotheses. So wouldn't it be correct that what you need to do is to provide naturalistic explanations that are as plausible as the theistic explanation?
I'll accept plausible. If I said possible, I really meant plausible. I thought I had written plausible, possible, because that certainly is my view, that the naturalistic explanations are the more plausible. They're the simpler. As long as we have some model, such as the one I talked about concerning the origin of the Big Bang, if these models are in agreement with all existing knowledge, even though we can't prove them to be correct, they do get published in the top physics journals, and their articles are written by very reputable physicists. So this exercise is taken seriously, and if it's there as a plausible explanation and it agrees with everything that we know, then it's going to always be preferable over something that we have no information about whatsoever, just a hypothesis of an unknown entity.
Okay, Dr. Stenger, another question?
Oh, I have to ask another question. Yes, I'd like to get back to the morality thing. Let me put it in a different way. If religion, whatever form, was necessary for morality, then wouldn't you expect that the non-religious would be less moral than the religious? Yet I think the evidence is not there. In fact, it even might be a bit on the other side. Witness the debaucheries of the Catholic Church. Take the child abuse in families. It's higher among Christians proportionately than any other group. There are more Christians in jail proportionately than any other group. And you really don't find too many humanists, for example, in jail. Well, you don't find too many humanists anyplace. But,
a lot of people become Christians in jail.
Well, but I think
question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought us back to this issue, because I think this is important. As I said, my argument is not at all that in order to live a moral and decent life, you have to believe in God. On the contrary, in fact, the Bible actually teaches that God's moral law is instinctively written on the heart of every person, so that we have an instinctual moral knowledge that we ought to love our children rather than torture them and abuse them. So I don't think at all that it would follow that people who are quote-unquote religious are going to be more moral than somebody who's not religious. Rather, my argument is that if you don't have a God as a transcendent anchor or basis for morality, then moral values are purely ephemeral byproducts of socio-biological evolution. And if you ran the film of evolution in reverse and then started it up again, you might have gotten totally different creatures with a totally different set of moral values that evolved. And there's no way that one of them could say, but our morality is objective and true, and the other ones would say, no, our morality is objective and true. From the biological system of evolution, you can't get an objective system of or grounding for moral values. It leads immediately to sociocultural relativism. And that's why I think you have to have a transcendent anchor for the grounding of objective values.
We have only a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to get the last question. And could I ask you each for a 45-second answer? How do we know truly that we're objective? How do we know objectively that we're being objective?
Yeah. I don't think any of us are totally objective. That is one of the few insights of postmodernists, I think. I don't think they have many good insights, but one of them would be that all of us are historically conditioned. We're midstream, so to speak, and therefore the search for kind of pristine objectivity, a neutral point of view from nowhere, is really impossible. But what we have to do is simply try to do our best to reason logically, to obey the rules of logic, and then to use our best evidence. And we can check this with others. I think that's the value of these debates, to participate like this.
Can you tell me how I can know objectively that you're being objective?
Oh, that I'm being objective. That wasn't the same question.
It wasn't the same question.
Yeah, sure.
How can we know that he's being objective?
One of the points about science is that science has provides you with a procedure for testing objectivity. In fact, it's even built into our equations. We call it covariance, and it means that when you look at something from a different point of view, you better have the same law of physics, or else it's incorrect, because it can't depend on the observer. And that's the test that one makes. The test that one makes is that in order to describe objective reality, what we call objective reality, it has to be something that is the same from all points of view. And that's one thing that's pretty clear about morality, is it's not the same from all points of view. So I severely doubt that morals are objective, although I've said that just even if they were, I still don't see why the transcendent, there has to be some transcendent source for them. But in any case, the evidence, as viewed by, again, from my scientific point of view, not point at all toward any kind of objective morality.
Thank you, gentlemen. At this point, I ask Dr. Hayes to make an announcement and lead us through the end of the debate.
Now it is time for the final statements. The final statement, first, for the theist position. Dr. Craig.
In my final statement, I'd like to draw together some of the threads of this debate and see if we can come to some conclusions. I said that in assessing rationally the question of whether God exists, we need to weigh the evidence for and against the existence of God. Well, what evidence have we heard against the existence of God tonight from Vic Stenger? Well, we first heard assertions that various of the attributes of God were incompatible with each other, but I answered those, and we've yet to hear a response. With respect to the problem of evil, I pointed out that no philosopher has been able to prove an inconsistency between the statements that God exists and that evil exists, and that in fact we can prove that they are consistent. Indeed, that evil itself proves that God exists, if genuine evil is real. And we heard no response to that. With respect to naturalistic explanations being better than supernaturalistic explanations, I agreed with that methodological principle and said that as long as plausible naturalistic explanations are available, they ought to be preferred. The question is, are they available? We differ on that issue. Finally, should God's actions be observable, I suggested that there is abundant evidence of the reality of God, and that if Vic Stenger is going to use this as an argument against God, he would have to show that if God exists, there ought to be more evidence of His existence than the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning, a realm of objective moral values, the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, and religious experience, and I don't think he can do that. In other words, basically, I think that we've seen very, very slight, very weak evidence on the atheist side of the scale in tonight's debate. Now, what about reasons for God's existence? Are they any more substantial? Well, I certainly think that they are. First, the argument from existence, that anything that exists requires an explanation of its existence, including the universe.